So in week 2, our discussion questions and our articles are looking at sports, the experience of sports in high school and college. So where sports are kind of in our educational institutions and systems. And I wanted to look at a couple of very specific examples. And the first article that you read, the Levine article, dealt with some ethnographies. And that's just some very specific yet very deep stories of just a few individuals and how sports in school made a difference in their lives. And we see a few other sociological and demographic variables mixed in that are part of their story, particularly race. And we'll see that a lot through the sociology of sport, is that usually we can't separate out your personal experience based on only one thing. We are all of our variables, such as our race, our religion, our socioeconomic status, where we grew up, who our parents were, those all interact with each other and make a difference in our experiences. So ethnographies just explore and uncover all of those different layers in the individual experience. So that's why I wanted us to read that Levine article, is that it's a great example of how some of those different factors interact. So our first discussion question looked at coaches as a mediating factor in high school sport. And I'm less concerned with the specific findings of the study and more concerned with us understanding the concept of a mediating factor, because that's pretty important in sociology in general. So in this particular example, a mediating factor is something that provides a go-between or a catalyst between two variables. And our variables were participation in high school sports, whether or not a student participated in high school sports, and then the other variable was how well they did in school. So the Levine article was looking at the experience of participating in sport and how that may or may not have made a difference in their particular success in high school. And so the Levine article found coaches in particular to be probably the mediating factor in whether or not athletics provided a tool for which students to be more successful in high school. Maybe they stayed in or not. Maybe they didn't get in trouble because they played sports. But the ones who did well with sports were the ones that had coaches who made some effort or connection with those students. So that's kind of what a mediating factor means. It provides that catalyst between the variables. So the students who had the coaches that seemed to make a difference did better than the ones that maybe didn't have as much of a presence or a relationship with their coaches. So then our next question looked at the idea of coaches as a mediating factor, and then the next article, that Fornaris, Kemeyer, and Trudel article about how the adults, meaning the coaches and the parents and the administrators, how the adults viewed the expectation that sports developed self-control as a value and a skill, and the adults expected that way more than the students did. And so how does that relate to what the Levine article found as far as coaches being a moderator? And I wondered if you thought that, or if we could interpret the idea that maybe administrators and coaches see the development of variables and skills such as self-control more as part of their job than the students viewed it as. And that's kind of a cool idea for any of us that are interested in getting into coaching, is looking at what the Fornaris, Kemery, and Trudel article saw were the expectations of coaches and administrators. Maybe they saw that more as part of their job, where the students didn't really see that as an expectation of coaches or as part of what the coaches were trying to do. So I thought that was a cool connection that we could make between those two articles. And then the third discussion question looked at the idea of the relationship between sports and college admissions. So we looked at a few questions about the high school articles, and now we're looking at a couple of questions with college articles. And so what's the relationship between sports and admissions? And, there were some well-documented studies about how admissions applicants to a university really spike after there's a big postseason appearance or a championship even. So winning or postseason appearances have a short-term boost in applications. Those schools might see it for a year or maybe two, but then they kind of normalize. And then what about the size of the applicant pool? It increases. It seems to increase. So that's what we mean by a short-term boost in applications. And then another interesting thing is quantity doesn't necessarily reflect quality. So the academic quality of applicants didn't really seem to be affected by that postseason appearance or that championship appearance. So, numbers are good, more applicants are good, but if the quality isn't there, then I wonder what that, if that brings the benefit of having more applicants down or not. I'm not sure. So just an interesting result that was brought about by this particular article. And then lastly, we looked at the quality and quantity of applicants. And what about the diversity of applicants? That's an important thing in college admissions, is looking at the diversity of applicants, because that's a big way in which we all learn. That's a way in which we can make the environment of our educational institutions more rich and diverse. That's how we can better learn from each other, and it better reflects our society. So that's an important thing for university administrators, is the diversity of applicants and of the student body. And what this particular article found about the admissions was that it may draw students from more underrepresented groups. So that's good. So some really mixed results on looking at college sports and postseason appearances and the effect on admissions. I just thought it presented a diverse and mixed bag of results, and so that was interesting to look at. And then your last discussion question looked at the idea of opportunity cost. And we talked about this in finance last semester, didn't we? The idea of opportunity cost is that if you put your money in one place, you don't have that money to put to another place. So here in sports, in college sports, opportunity cost means if donors are giving to the school's athletic programs, then there is less resources to be given to programs in other areas of the university, so to the arts or to academic buildings or to whatever else in the university. And maybe we can even broaden that with the idea that there's less money to be given to some of the nonprofits in our community, so Little Rock Parks and Rec or Boys and Girls Clubs or programs like that. So do athletic donations hurt donations to the rest of the university? And I asked you to further look at some studies that examine this. And so I look forward to seeing what you found in regard to that specific variable. So thank you for your attention to week 2. And I look forward to revisiting you in week 3.